Just like any human being, some animals are high-maintenance creatures. While we need to get our hair cut quite often, woolly animals need to get their coat sheared on a regular basis too. When farmers sheared this one animal's insanely thick coat, they couldn't believe their eyes. Stay tuned to find out what stood before them underneath it all. In the north of Melbourne, Australia, there is an animal rescue and sanctuary. It is situated on a farm in Lancefield, to be exact, and it is known as Edgar's Mission Farm Sanctuary. They recently gained some recognition after posting the story of an unusual-looking creature on the social media platform TikTok. The video is still racking up millions of views. One day, a property maintenance man was on one of his usual shifts when he suddenly noticed that there was something close to the boundary of the property. It didn't take long for him to realize that the spotted animal had been out there alone for a long time. So the man contacted the Edgar's Mission Farm Sanctuary in hopes that some people would come along to assist the wandering animal. After collecting the creature, the rescuers decided to name him Baarack. Unfortunately for the animal, his coat had become greatly overgrown. Also, if you were to take a close look at his ear, it's clear that he once had an ear tag, indicating he used to be owned by someone. Nevertheless, Baarack's heavy coat suggested that it had been a long time since his owner had cared for him. And if you haven't guessed already, Baarack was a lost sheep. Kelly Dinham, a worker at the sanctuary's community engagement and advocacy, said that it's important for sheep to get their coats sheared regularly. Otherwise, it will continue to grow to an excessive amount. Kelly provided some backstory on sheep and their coats. This is a result of domestication as the ancestor of modern sheep. The wild mouflon was a self-shedding animal whose coat grew and shed in accordance with the seasons. Keeping their coats light is also a matter of health, so Baarack finally got the shedding he needed. However, after the long-overdue trim session, people were then stunned to see what was underneath his thick coat. Once the huge coat was gone, it was clear that Baarack was very thin. Being underweight wasn't the only issue, because the wool had once been clouding his vision. Some debris was stuck around the sheep's eyes. For a long time, the poor animal needed help, but there was nobody he could turn to. After interacting with humans once again, it's good to hear that Baarack is now a lot more trusting of people. According to the sanctuary that posted about him on TikTok, the shy sheep is getting more confident with each passing day. We truly believe that he understands that what we've done for him has eased his life and turned it for the better, says Kelly. Baarack's shorn coat was incredibly heavy, measuring at around 78 pounds, 38.4 kilograms. Although it wasn't a record-breaking number, it sure is impressive. After it all, it's great news that Baarack was finally able to get some help. It seems that there are a lot of thick-coated sheep wandering around. There's one more story I found about another interesting sheep, possibly the world's woolliest. A Tasmanian couple, the Hazels, were farmers who were used to handling and caring for animals. However, they never expected to have a potential contender for the world's woolliest sheep walking right into their hands. Peter Hazel owns a farm situated in Tasmania's Midlands. When they saw a stray sheep had begun to wander around his property, he knew he had to do something about it. In fact, the sheep was apparently a very easy catch. Since the size of his woolly coat had impaired its vision, Peter snuck up behind the sheep and grabbed it, bringing it into his yard, with the help of his wife Nettie. The merino ram turned out to be 6 years old. On top of this, he had never been shorn before. The couple thought it would have been good humor to give him the name of Sean, in reference to the popular television show Shaun the Sheep. Considering how Sean had never had his coat trimmed before, it actually seems quite fitting to hear that his coat boasts a generous estimation of around 44 pounds, 20 kilograms of wool. Nettie stated that this sheep is by far the heaviest she has ever lifted. "I just couldn't believe it," Nettie exclaimed. "I just could not believe a sheep could have so much wool." After the Hazels took Sean in, Peter noticed that the woolly sheep had a tag on it. It indicated that Sean had once belonged to a farm located on the east coast of the Tasmanian state. Peter was shocked that this lonely sheep had wandered around for 6 years, managing to survive all the potential threats within the wild. It was truly a miracle. Sean's coat was something special. Although it is matted as a result of not being cared for, the wool is not only impressive in thickness, but also in quality. Nettie claimed that she planned on entering his fleece in country shows. It's sweet to think that this lonely sheep has now gained a lot of popularity for his precious wool. The lost and found. While the Hazel couple took in Sean, who had once belonged to a different farm, this Tasmanian family had a reunion with their lost sheep, Prickles. In 2013, the Tasmanian state experienced an unfortunate bushfire that had negatively affected people and animals alike. Unfortunately for the Gray family, their farm had caught fire during the event. As a result, around 50 kilometers of their fencing was lost and had to be rebuilt. However, one thing they couldn't get easily back with some money was their precious lamb. She ended up getting stuck in a 200-acre bush block, and once the fires went out, she was no longer there. Some people had spotted her briefly post-bushfires, but for 7 years, Prickles couldn't seem to find her way home. During the COVID-19 lockdown, the family chose to celebrate their son's birthday at the farm they had rebuilt. When Alice Gray joined her family for some cooking outdoors, the sight of a big, white, fluffy creature caught her attention. Although she wasn't sure of what it was at the time, after receiving a phone call from her husband, the mystery fluff ball turned out to be Prickles. Prickles was a merino too. This meant that her wool was the type to grow to an excessive amount. Alice made a statement about Prickles' new appearance. "She is absolutely round. She is a great big fluffy ball of wool." Because it had been such a long time since they last saw her, dirt found its way into her wool. The Gray family was eager to get her fleece off so that she could be clean and healthy once again. The sheep then got the haircut she needed, and they removed 30 pounds, 13.6 kilograms of wool. Not that much, but at least this merino was a happy sheep again after all these years. On the run. Just over a decade ago, a mixed breed sheep known as Sheila had escaped a shearing session from her farmer, Derek Turvey. Although she was part of a flock, she separated herself, eventually wandering into the woodsy area of Tasmania. After 6 years of traveling by herself, Sheila was spotted by Peter Jones. Because of her overgrown coat, she had fallen on the road and was unable to get herself back up. Peter claimed that when he looked at her, she winked at him. He didn't have the heart to leave poor Sheila, so Peter went out of his way to rescue her. "I tried to get it back on its feet. It was in the table drain, not a deep one, but a narrow thing," he explained. Several years without anyone keeping an eye on the ewe meant that her fleece had accumulated to a hefty size. After John Alomes sheared her fleece and put it on the scales, curious to see the number, it turned out that the ewe's wool weighed around 48 pounds, 21.9 kilograms. Unlike some other sheep I've mentioned so far, Sheila wasn't as lucky when it came to cleanliness. The wool of her coat was far from pleasant to touch, due to its clotted and matted texture. Even though wool is typically white in color, some of her fleece turned out to be a yellow shade, due to the tough conditions that she'd been in since her escape. Her wool hasn't fared too well. Nevertheless, she is now in good hands and her well-being is of the utmost importance. A heavy burden to carry. While the other sheep got lost because they wandered a little too far from their farms, some sheep simply aren't kept on the radar by their farmers. Eunice had been left unattended for years, and this fact can be seen simply by looking at her large coat. In the north of Melbourne, close to Redcastle, local residents couldn't ignore the sight of the lonely sheep with the overgrown fleece and instantly felt pity. Some of them called up the RSPCA to get her some aid. After this phone call, Eunice was fortunate enough to gain access to a veterinarian as well as getting an overdue trim of her coat. As previously mentioned, it wasn't good for merino sheep to be left unshorn, since they are unable to shed themselves. This can be especially troublesome during the hotter months, so it is recommended that their coats are attended to every year. It's a good thing that Eunice didn't appear to have any complications from her huge coat. After her shearing and checkup, Eunice found a new place to live. This home is in Geelong, which is a fair distance away from where she was found. The head animal welfare inspector of the RSPCA said, "It was fantastic to see her transformation after shearing and to send her on to her new home." Whether a sheep belongs to a large farm centered around production, or even if it is only a hobby farm, keeping an eye on their coats should be a top priority. Funnily enough, all these heavy-coated sheep turned out to be from Australia. Isn't it so strange to think that an animal can still move around and function even with so much fleece weighing it down? If you were impressed by any of these sheep stories, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.